In the golden age of television, few characters etched themselves so permanently into the hearts of audiences as Hoss Cartwright of Bonanza. The man behind the role, Dan Blocker, was more than just a television star. He was a gentle giant beloved by millions for his warmth, humor, and humble demeanor. His sudden death in 1970 shocked fans and left a gaping hole in American pop culture. Over the decades, whispers, myths, and speculation have swirled around the circumstances of his passing. Now, the mystery has been laid to rest, and the truth, as it turns out, is sobering and tragic. A star larger than life, Dan Blocker wasn't just physically imposing, standing well over 6 feet tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds. He was also a towering presence in the world of Western television. As Eric Hoss Cartwright, he brought a lovable sincerity to Bonanza that made him the show's emotional center. Viewers loved him for his mix of childlike innocence, moral conviction, and endearing clumsiness. Blocker's off-screen personality mirrored that of his character. He was known for his kindness, strong family values, and disdain for Hollywood's glitz and arrogance. To his fans, Blocker wasn't acting, he was Hoss. That deep connection only made his untimely death all the more painful. The day everything changed in May 1972. The entertainment world was jolted by the news. Dan Blocker had died. The headlines were as brief as they were shocking. He was only 43 years old. At first, there was confusion. How could such a seemingly healthy, vibrant man die so suddenly? The official word was that Blocker had undergone routine gallbladder surgery. The operation itself had gone well, but in the days that followed, complications developed. He suffered a pulmonary embolism, a blockage in a lung artery usually caused by blood clots traveling from the legs. It was quick, fatal, unforgiving. Fans struggled to accept it. A routine surgery had turned into a death sentence. How could someone so full of life one day be gone the next? Enter the remorse and the absence of clarity, and perhaps fueled by the reluctance of the entertainment industry to dwell on such an upsetting event, rumors began to swirl. Over the years, the mystery of Dan Blocker's death grew more exaggerated, more convoluted, and more bizarre. One persistent myth was that he had drowned while trying to save someone's life, a heroic end that matched his character's on-screen persona. Others believed he died on set, or that there had been medical malpractice. Still others repeated a strange urban legend that he was buried in a piano crate because of his large size. None of it was true, but in an era before instant news verification, such stories found fertile ground. The truth, once fully understood, revealed something far less romantic, a tragic but all too common postoperative complication that claimed the life of a man who should have had decades left to live. Why the truth isn't good, so why, after all these years, does the confirmed reality of Dan Blocker's death still sit poorly with so many fans? Because it reminds us of something we'd rather not face. Our heroes are human. They bleed, they suffer, and they die, often not in cinematic climaxes or dramatic rescues, but in sterile hospital rooms, victims of biology and bad luck. Blocker's passing was not dramatic or poetic. It was senseless, it was sudden, and that, in a way, makes it all the harder to accept. Fans who imagined him riding off into the sunset or dying in the noble act of saving a stranger were left, instead, with a mundane and brutal fact: even beloved stars can be felled by random chance. A hole too large to fill. Bonanza never fully recovered from Dan Blocker's death. The show had been running for over a decade and was one of the most popular programs on television, but Blocker's character was the glue that held the ensemble together. He was the heart, the soul, the everyman who grounded the show's often dramatic plots with warmth and humanity. When he died, the writers were left with an impossible decision. There was no graceful way to replace Hoss. They tried introducing new characters, shifting focus, but it never felt the same. The chemistry had changed. The absence was too noticeable. In a groundbreaking move for the time, the show addressed Blocker's death directly. Hoss was written out of the script not as having gone off to some distant land, but as having died. It was one of the first times in television history that a main character's real-life death was acknowledged. Dan mourned on screen. The emotion shown by the cast wasn't acting, it was grief. But Bonanza limped through its final season, and it wasn't long before it was cancelled. Many believe it should have ended with Blocker's passing. The show, like its fans, never quite recovered. The cost of myth. McKingan of The Dangers of Celebrity is that fans often conflate the character with the actor. in Dan Blocker's case. The line was particularly blurry. Haas was so much like the man behind the role that fans couldn't and often didn't separate the two. It became easy to assume that Blocker, like Haas, would live forever, invincible in the dusty terrain of the Ponderosa. That's why the truth of his death hurts so much. It strips away the fantasy. It forces us to remember that the people we idolize are just as fragile as the rest of us. That's not a comforting thought. It's raw, it's disillusioning, and so, in an attempt to protect the illusion, fans invented better stories, tales of sacrifice, mystery, or heroism. But in the end, none of those stories hold up. The reality, gruesome, clinical, and unfair, is all that remains. Legacy beyond the gravity. Despite the way he died, Dan Blocker's legacy lives on, not just through Bonanza reruns, but through the lives he touched both on and off screen. He was a devoted father and husband, a decorated war veteran, and a man who used his fame to support charitable causes. Those who worked with him spoke of his humility, his loyalty, and his fierce dedication to his craft. He wasn't just a big man in stature, he was a giant in spirit. And while he didn't die the way fans might have imagined, he lived in a way that still inspires people today. His sons, particularly Dirk Blocker, who later starred in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, carried on his acting legacy. But perhaps the greatest tribute is the love that fans still show him more than 50 years later. They remember Haas, they remember Dan, and they remember how, for a while, the two were indistinguishable. A lesson in mortality and solving the mystery of Dan Blocker's death. We confront something uncomfortable, the randomness of loss. There was no grand plan, no fateful accident, no epic battle. Just a man who went in for surgery and never came out. It reminds us to treasure the people in our lives, to avoid taking time for granted, and to separate fantasy from reality in ways that are healthy, respectful, and grounded in truth. Dan Blocker wasn't a myth, he was a man, a good one, that, in the end, should be enough.